got Richard, but are we going to say both at once? Yeah, cool. We're going to do item 8 and 9. They'll look separate through the presentation, but we're going to do them together and debate them together as they are connected, but they are different. So we'll talk about, we've got Richard and Nick and Marina together. Kia ora koutou katoa. Thank you for coming today. Who's going to kick off? Nick, kia ora.
Tēnā rawa atu kia koe te tiamana, tēnā te mihi atu kia koe mo tō karakia I arehia I amatuma I tēnei rā, kia koutou katoa, aku rangatira I arehi tō mātou hapori tēnei ka mihi atu. Just in the spirit of the 3:30 deadline, I'll keep this relatively brief, but I did want to introduce this piece of work. This is really important work for us. The Tamaki Makaurau, the Kia ora Tamaki Makaurau framework is a really strategic piece of work for us that helps lead the work that we do with our Māori communities. And also the Māori Outcomes Fund, there was a directive from the Mayor in the LTP around having a review around this fund. So we're bringing this work back to you. Just a note that this has been done under the leadership and guidance of the Māori Political Working Group. So just an acknowledgement to Councillor Leone and those that sit on that board. And I'd just like to take the opportunity to introduce Marina Matthews, who's been leading the Tamaki Ora, Kia ora Tamaki Makaurau refresh, and Richard Court, who's been leading the Māori Outcomes Review. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Marina.
Ngā mihi, kia koutou katoa. So without further ado, as the chair and Nick had mentioned, we're going to go through a brief presentation on both of the papers, which is asking the committee for the decisions set out on the screen there. I'm going to take the presentation as read and just emphasise or highlight, clarify 4 of the slides with regards to Tamaki Ora. So first of all, Kia ora Tamaki Makaurau has been the Māori Outcomes framework for the past 5 years. It didn't necessarily have a time frame or a statutory requirement to review it, but we thought that it was timely given what has happened since the previous one with COVID and various storms in Tamaki Makaurau. So we did a refresh. One of the things about the refresh is that we've engaged quite extensively with mana whenua, Māori communities, mātā waka. So it's not merely a council-centric document. We've engaged with over 335 individuals. Personally, Ngā Mātarai has engaged with, to date, 14 mana whenua and a couple of mātā waka, but haukura, and when they presented to us their he whenua makaurau, they had engaged with each of the mana whenua. We're still meeting with various mana whenua in the coming weeks, but we had our partners who had gone out and engaged with over 13,000 rangatahi, young student leaders, takatapui, Māori women leaders, people in the community around their thoughts, aspirations and goals for Auckland Council, as well as specifically in any Māori outcomes strategy. So based on our own engagement, as well as hearing from iwi themselves, we looked at over 700 feedback or submissions from Māori entities and to local boards, to the LTP submission process. Many of you were on the budget committee that had heard from 3 particular mātā waka representatives themselves individually. So we went through all of that as part of a desktop exercise as well. And then we produced what we think is a representation of Māori outcomes, priorities and goals, and we've set it out in tamaki order. So one thing that you'll see there is we've reduced the mana outcomes from 10 to 7. These outcomes predominantly are focused on the areas that Auckland Council can statutorily have the greatest impact for not only Māori, but for community within Auckland going forward. We've also got 3 enabling support functions just down the bottom there, which are the foundations. This is kind of the internal Auckland Council focused aspect of the strategy, but it's around ourselves as a council being able to strengthen our own capability and build those foundational partnerships with Māori and iwi, as well as ensuring that we are enabling Māori outcomes. I also wanted to emphasise the performance measurement aspect of the framework. So the framework does 2 things. One, it sets out a strategy, but then it also sets out some performance measures for council to be able to adhere to so that it can be delivering impact and outcomes for Māori. We've adopted a theory of change approach, which is an evaluative approach that looks at not just the inputs, which was what one could say about Kia ora Tamaki Makaurau, but it also looks at the outputs as well as having a target. So I just thought I'd talk you through an example as this one relates to the Māori Outcomes Fund in particular with marae order. So one of the proposed measures there is that there are a number of marae that are receiving physical upgrades, compliance support, or support for planning projects and events and activations. So what this means is that Auckland Council is able to support marae infrastructure development so that it is able to have marae as a thriving part of our Auckland Council, our Tamaki Makaurau landscape. The other aspect of the performance measurement framework is not just about delivering performance measures and meeting those targets. It's around using a raft of various tools in order to be able to demonstrate the impact for Māori. So you'll see up there on the the right, is the performance measurement framework. So that's just one part of what it is that the shift that we're trying with Tamaki Order to demonstrate impact, outcome and value for Māori. We're also going to use the Achieving Māori Outcomes plans, the AMO plans, within each of the departments, as well as within the CCOs. We're also going to use storytelling and evaluation, which will be finalised and come to the Policy and Planning Committee as part of the Māori Outcomes Annual Report, which is due to come to you in August this year. We'll also be looking at the Māori perspectives across the organisation. So today we're talking about the Māori Outcomes Strategy, but all of this is within the wider Auckland Council strategy, which is currently, there's a mayoral directive along with councillors to look at the group strategic framework, which is streamlining all the performance measurement outcomes. So this is just a snapshot of the Māori outcomes related measures that are within that wider framework.
Morena, similar to Marina, I will be just sort of pointing out a few key points per slide. So really what I'd like to convey through the presentation and the paper sort of a few key points. Firstly, that the Māori Outcomes Fund, in sort of answering the request for a review, we're looking at making the fund more accessible externally and with an emphasis on partnership and co-investment. There will be greater transparency in bringing funding decisions to a committee, so that's within your paper today. Also, greater clarity on how the fund can be used to support marae in general, because that's been a point that we've been asked to look at throughout a number of different conversations, and also just making the point that the fund will be used to achieve an equity of outcomes as opposed to necessarily an equity of inputs, so kind of equal funding. Just to look at the proposed revised governance, so what we're proposing is that we want to sort of mimic the what you see as comes through the Regional Facilities and Investment Fund. So that's a fund that is of similar sort of complexity and level of funding to the Māori Outcomes Fund. In terms of a process, so we will be coming back to you with criteria and all the sort of finer detail, but just at a high level, the process will be that we ask for expressions of interest from our external partners, so that's Mana Whenua Mātai Waka, and that we will continue to support initiatives that come through the council that are co-designed with Māori or Māori-led through our existing investment delivery framework. The assessment process will be governed, or will be conducted, by staff. We'll be looking for how the fund is used in the context of operational budgets and other LTP budgets. So this is really about making sure that the fund is performing a distinct role as opposed to being perhaps dipped into from sort of multiple points. We'll also be bringing to you a multi-year investment plan, recognising that obviously the Māori Outcomes Fund spans the LTP and really from FY28. At the moment there is significant unallocated funding. So staff recommendations will come to you through a panel led by Nick, and we'll do that really as soon as possible in the new council term. Just turning to marae specifically, we have developed just a few sort of guiding principles that, again, we will need to wrap into the actual sort of finer detail of criteria and so forth. But I just wanted to sort of pick on the final one of those bullet points, which talks about building relationships between Mana Whenua and Mātai Waka marae. So what we've said in the paper is that there is a clear need to recognise the different contexts that marae operate in. We're aware of situations where, for the sort of sake of a greater clarity or a relationship between Mana Whenua and Mātai Waka marae, there would be a greater understanding of what marae investment entails. So if it's for a new marae or the expansion of a marae, again, we need to look at making sure that Mana Whenua have sort of endorsed that expansion, or that's what we're proposing. The sort of translation of that into action, we have a marae infrastructure programme that is currently funding the 32 marae that's contained in the appendix on your paper. We've made our way through quite a considerable number of those, but that programme will run until FY29. We are looking at, again, back to the sort of funding for equity of outcome. We're looking at the potential to revisit some of those marae that we weren't able to bring up to a particular standard. We're also looking to expand the Cultural Initiatives Fund from its current sort of definition to include things like the activation of marae, digital infrastructure, and potentially maintenance for systems for compliance. So that is where we've got some marae that we've needed to put things like fire systems into, where they don't currently have the ability to perhaps maintain those and therefore comply with their building consent. So in all our work, in terms of marae, we are conscious of the different contexts that marae work in. We think that an expression of interest process will help us to have a conversation up front about what is the outcome that's sought, how might council play a role, if at all, and how might we develop things like partnerships and co-investment into that. So, yeah, really the next steps are for us to focus on the iwi order and marae order and community priorities that are outlined in the Tamaki order framework. We will complete the in-flight projects that, again, are listed in the attachment to your report, and we will focus on building that pipeline, because I think there's some intensive work that we need to do to really clarify the priorities and the role that council can play in those priorities. And we will then bring back revised guidelines and advice for you as soon as possible in FY26.
Kia ora, thank you so much. I know this body of work has been many briefings, drop-ins, workshops, hours and hours of work for staff, especially with that wide engagement and consultation. So thank you so much. I will go to Deputy Mayor first, who has some questions.
Morena, thank you very much. My question is not so much specifically on the strategy, it's more a bit broader. So whilst the Tamaki Order draft strategy is aimed at specifically improving outcomes for Māori, and obviously supported by the fund, which is, I don't know whether the next item or together or whatever, can you discuss how the focus and the investment will benefit all Aucklanders, please?
Thanks for your question, Councillor. In a broad sense, we know that our investment into wider community benefits have a knock-on benefit for Māori, and I would suggest to you that our investment into these Māori initiatives will also have that knock-on benefit for the wider community as well. So from a practical perspective, if we look at things that we have invested in the past, such as the economic hubs of Te Puna or Te Ngāhere, these are embedded in our communities where they're actually helping a broader range of the community. Things like our environment projects, such as Tūmai Taonga out on Aotea, is looking after one of our most valuable biodiversity assets that we have in Tamaki Makaurau. And even things like our marae programs that were, really valuable assets during our floods as hubs of services that actually helped a lot of people in need at those particular time. What I'd also say about this is that the Tamaki Order framework is a measuring framework, so it measures the output and outcome. It's not in a vacuum of work. It actually is across the wide breadth of work that we're doing. It's just that we're specifically targeting on these outcomes that will benefit for our communities. It is, of course, within a wider range of work that the Auckland Council delivers for our entire communities.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. And for, sorry, Councillor Filipaina wasn't on my list, but he did text me and Angela yesterday, so my fault for not ensuring. You're already in the meeting, Councillor Filipaina, but we'll just get the meeting to vote on it. I'll move and Deputy Chair will second for online attendance, Standing Order 3.3.3a. All those in favour? Aye. And welcome, Councillor Filipaina, who's already in the room anyway. Kia ora. Sorry about that. Back to the substantive. Councillor Leone online, you'd like a question, and thank you for all your work chairing a lot of this mahi. Thanks.
Oh, kia ora koutou, and aroha mai that I can't be there in person, and acknowledge all the mahi that has gone into this work that you've done. Look, my question is just around the accessibility across Tamaki Makaurau, and with the review and the framework that's been done, do you feel that there's going to be more of an opportunity for communities across our city to be able to access more funding?
Thank you for your question, Councillor. As it sort of states in the paper, the process to date has been that that the projects that are funded through the Māori Outcomes Fund come through our directorates as the first port, and then they come to us for decisions. The adoption of an expressions of interest process means that there'll be a little bit more transparency over where the money is going to our community so they can see that, but also offer them the opportunity to put forward bids through that assessment process that then comes back to you for that substantive decision as to where that funding goes. So yes, we're confident that it will mean more access to a wider breadth of community to this funding.
Ka pai, ngā mihi.
Kia ora, Councillor. Member Ashby.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, just congratulations on some really important and excellent work. So, ngā mihi to you and the team. Just a couple of questions from me. You note in the report that there are some risks just on readiness and capability across council whānau to kind of implement it. So, I guess in terms of the phased rollout and I guess implementation, you know, what might that look like? Just as one question. Then the other question I have is, and I think it's amazing that this is more outcome focused and there's some good KPIs around that. Just in terms of the monitoring and reporting back of that, what might that look like? I'd say, kia ora.
Through the chair. Thank you very much, Member Ashby. So with regards to your question around the rollout, so some may think that all the work has been done now that we've actually got the strategy and the performance measurement framework. But actually from an Auckland Council perspective, we now need to ensure that we have a couple of things. We have a change management process so that staff understand, know, and how and can align their work with it. We also need to have a communications plan, not only within internally, which includes to our local board members, but also externally. We need to go back to mana whenua and Māori communities that we had heard from during the development of Tamaki Audit and let them know, close that loop. We also need to look at having a capability or a training process with regards to staff. So we'll be doing that over the next 6 months. So that hopefully we'll be able to demonstrate to the Policy and Planning Committee when we next come back that we have put this rollout in place. We'll also be taking an update to the governing body and the Haukura quarterly meetings as well. With regards to your questions around the monitoring and reporting, as you had identified, one of the key shifts is now the focus on the outputs, the outcomes, the values, the impact to Māori. This is quite a change from how Auckland Council has measured or delivered or enabled Māori outcomes before. So we don't expect it to happen overnight. There will be a full rollout with regards to the Achieving Māori Outcomes plans, the AMO plans, which all of our 33 departments and the 4 CCOs currently have. We'll also be extending the type of monitoring and reporting and evaluation that we do. And I think I had mentioned that we will collate all of that and bring it back to the Policy and Planning Committee in August and each year onwards as part of the annual report for Māori outcomes.
Great, thank you.
Kia ora, Member Ashby. Councillor Sayers.
And thank you for the presentation, and yes, congratulations, all the good work and important work that you've achieved. I had 2 questions, Chair. The first was around, I had a strong impression at the beginning of the presentation about the number of people you'd engaged with and some new avenues there. So I just wanted confirmation, had you done something new there to increase your reach, you know, to engage with more people, and was that an increase or not? And related to that, going forward, in terms of your ability to stay in contact with those groups, and if they're new contacts, just your ability to continue to get input and feedback from them to help update us. So that was the first question. The second question is just perhaps a little bit more into the tactics around the strategy around Marae, development of Marae, and I don't know if you can answer it now, it could come back to me around, I'm particularly interested in a Marae, my area, and Rodney at Glorit. I don't know if that's in scope or not, but when I've ever been to that marae, I've kind of been asked about the roading in and out of that marae, and I don't know if that's, you know, been alerted to you or is in scope for future work with them. And it could be a private road, I'm not quite sure. It's Auckland Transport or on private land. Yeah.
Through the chair, thank you, councillor. I'm not too sure if we had done something different from what had previously happened, but one of the things that we had noted when we'd been doing the desktop review was just the breadth of submissions that are already received by Auckland Council with regards to Māori outcomes. And it's not necessarily just Māori communities or Māori entities, but it's broader than that. So we had done a stakeholder engagement exercise as part of Tamaki audit, as well as the review of the Māori Outcomes Fund. And for example, we did have 3 of the Mātā Waka entity groups who came and presented to you at the budget, including Rainbow Youth, Tōnui Consulting and Mad Avenue. So that was an opportunity for us to be able to bring in wider voices and perspectives. But also we made a point of listening to mana whenua about the various breadth and range that of folk that they engage with, and we took their lead as well.
You also mentioned about engaging in the classrooms as well. Was that new or something that can be continued?
Through the chair, yes. So I understand that, for example, Megan's local elections group and governance are using the same approach with regards to civics education of rangatahi around and getting them involved to be able to vote once they come of age, and the importance of having that civics understanding. So we utilise that process as well.
Through the chair, just to answer your second question, in a broad sense, opening the Cultural Initiatives Fund and shifting it to an expressions of interest process does mean that marae and cultural centres, are able to look at the fund and go through a criteria process. So in that regards, perhaps there might be avenues. Just noting, of course, and very aware of that community, recent programs have been carried out and delivered at Te Kiora Marae as well as Te Aroha Marae. Aware that there's work that's needed to be done at Puatahi, but perhaps you and I can have an offline conversation around how we might progress some of those outputs for that community.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Bartley.
Kia ora. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report and the work. My question is there enough in the pie so that we're not pitting mana whenua marae development against Mātā Waka urban marae development? I ask this question because I'm still, supporting our Ro Pōtaka marae, urban marae in Glen Innes for their upgrade, but it's taking a long time, so I don't want to see them fall behind with our new mana whenua coming through.
Kia ora, Councillor. Through the chair, thank you for the question. So we do have a significant marae infrastructure programme budget that is available. So again, if we, looking at each individual marae, if we can assess what's required, and we can have a look at through that expression of interest process, what we can support. So there is sufficient funding within the LTP budget that's been provided.
Thanks, Councillor. Member Hirare.
Kia ora. Mea tutahi kei a koutou e korangatira tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou a koutou mahi mō tēnei item. Nō reira, ngā mihi nui nui. Before I ask my question, in the past, there's been a lot of disjointed work done. And this time, everybody's in the tent. and we can all claim that it is our report, our mahi. So big ups to your team and everybody else, to the Secretariat, blah, 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 blah. Not to mention Mātāwaka and iwi Māori. Do you have, or did you have a return on investment sort of approach to this? I mean, what's in it for, what is the return for the council, Tāmaki? What's the return for Mātāwaka, for iwi? Did you have that sort of approach? You know, what am I going to, if somebody got up at a meeting and said, what's in it for me? Would you be able to answer that?
Firstly, thank you for the accolades, gratefully accepted. Secondly, that's a really great question. And I think in this space, what we're trying to do with our measurements outcome is, you know, provide a range of ways in which we could answer those questions with authority. You know, harking back to what Marina was sort of saying, our previous framework really did focus on inputs and maybe some outputs. This around inputs, outputs, impact and outcome will give us a better understanding and be able to answer with a little bit more authority of those questions. And I know that's kind of not answering the question by throwing a lot of words at you. So, but what I would say is that we have to think about what these social outcomes are. You know, our investment into marae as cultural hubs for our communities that are able to deliver a number of services, that are able to be at hubs where social service deliveries are able to connect to their people and to work. You know, there's an immeasurable amount of outcomes that these things are able to do for our communities. And there is also, you know, a lot of things that are out there that we're able to track. You know, some of the stuff we're wanting to do inside our Auckland plan about making this Tāmaki Makaurau having a Māori identity and, you know, really promoting that, the tourism opportunities, all of those things. So while I can't give you an authoritative answer around what that return of investment looks like in a real tangible dollar figure or in a numerical sense, I guess what we're trying to shift to in this is a really more mature approach to measuring, so that at some stage we can bring that back to you inside our Māori Outcomes report and give a greater sense to this council about the work that it's doing to lift our Māori communities.
And through the chair, I would just like to add our thanks to Haukura for being able to produce He Whenua Makaurau, the schedule of issues of significance, and also He Waka Kotoia, the Treaty of Waitangi audit, which you statutorily have to do every number of years, but that was also able to inform a lot of what Auckland Council's own Māori outcome strategy is, which from my perspective, I think it's helpful for us to be able to partner with Haukura to be able to use all of our resources and thinking power to be able to provide the best outcomes for Māori.
Great answer, thank you. Good question too. Councillor Turner.
Thank you. Just on the back of Councillor Bartley, she asked if you had enough budget to, and you said you had plenty of budget. How much budget is it? Because, and how's it split?
Kia ora, Councillor, through the chair. So we provisioned within the Māori Outcomes Fund initially for a 60 million sort of allocation for across the 32 marae. We've currently been through about 20, upwards of sort of high 20s of that budget, not including what we're currently delivering. So we do have a provision sort of annually of about 6 to 7 million for the next 3 years.
So I'm thinking of a specific situation in Te Atatu. So so that 60 million's split between new establishment of marae and old marae that are there. Is that correct?
So that list, so the list of 32 that's in the report, that's the scope of the programme.
Just my understanding, and if I understood Councillor Bartley right, she was asking really about iwi marae compared to mātāwaka marae, if I was correct, and the split there. So do you have a way you make sure that's equitable?
Thanks for the question. So to date, those 32 maraes, they roughly work out 50 and 50 mātāwaka and mana whenua maraes. To date, there's been, the state of those. So what happened was an assessment, a building assessment was undertaken, and it just so meant that a small amount more money was going to mātāwaka marae over the mana whenua marae. In the paper, we talk about equity of outcome, so looking at ways in which we can make sure that we're getting the right outcome for each of the marae, rather than focusing on, hey, here's a dollar amount. It's actually about what is it for the marae that will mean, because a lot of the time for mana whenua marae, this was invested into, sunk into, below ground infrastructure like water or ablutions and those kind of things. Just to the second point that you're raising with regards to mātāwaka marae, in particular with Te Atatu marae, there's, inside that paper, we also talk about how do we build those relationships with mana whenua as well as mātāwaka, so that there's, I guess, real cohesion around what the outcome is, both for the Māori community as well as for mana whenua, and really sort of look at ways in which we can really promote people working together, because I know that there's sometimes friction around some of that stuff. Finally, with the cultural impact, the cultural investment fund, that is, again, it's an expressions of interest process. It's open up. There's no cap on that, but it means it would be looking at any new investment that comes through, and then making an assessment based on the merits, and that assessment criteria will be coming back to this committee at a later date.
Thank you, Councillor. I think that is all the... Oh, sorry, Councillor Bartley.
Oh, thank you. I did want to ask, in terms of the stronger focus on aligning council's work with Māori aspirations, what's been the feedback so far from our senior management or executive in terms of the buy-in from all our departments to achieve what's in the refresh strategy?
Good. But to elaborate on that, the relationship with Māori is still a priority of our CEOs, and he reports on that through his back to governing body on a regular basis. It also features in our conversations with governing board and haukura, and just being part of the executive leadership team and Kāhui Rangatira, I know that there is a lot of strong support. There has been a lot of investment with the recent change program that Phil led out in terms of building everyone's understanding of the relationships, the opportunity, and some of the issues that have happened in the past. So I'm very confident that Kāhui Rangatira, our general managers, as well as our executive leadership team, are on board and rearing to go.
And if I could add to the Tūmaki's comments, also from a new ways of working perspective, Māori outcomes is one of the 3 foundational commitments or cross-cutting strategies across the LTP in the 7 investment areas. So it's Māori outcomes as well as Te Tāruki a Tāwhiti, which is the climate action plan, and Ngā Hapori Momoho, which is the thriving communities as well. So all of our general managers and departments are now putting Māori outcomes and climate and thriving equities or an equitable outcomes across all of their work, which is something a bit different that we haven't done previously.
Okay, that sounds good. And so this will help to kind of kind of move past, you know, a lot of the time the questioning is around engagement. Did you engage with Māori? And then at some point it's almost tokenistic. So this will move us past token engagement?
So it's part of, I guess, a wider lot of work. So of course we have this framework which will set the tone and set the strategy for the work that we're doing with our Māori communities. Engagement is also a priority. It's a priority for the CEO. And we are doing a lot more work in that space to build, well, to answer first of all, of course, the He Waka Kotuia audit recommendations that have come through, but also just to increase our engagement with Māori. I think there's a twofold piece there. It's around making sure that we've got good engagement over all of the work that we're doing, but also maybe reducing the sheer volume of engagement and looking at what's a priority for iwi, what's a priority for our Māori communities, and being really clear and focusing on those things. And that's certainly spoken to in the strategy.
Kia ora, thank you. Councillor Williamson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm one of these people who, when I read these papers and realise I don't know enough about what's behind them, that I really can't make a valued comment, but I do want to ask one thing. When I see things like words ensure equity of outcomes and we're signing up to that, does that open us up to any legal challenge in the future if we haven't achieved equity? Because I don't think equity of outcomes is possible, and if you get two people, just two, you won't get an equity of outcomes in their future life. They'll be different no matter what they started from. So I'm worried about any legal obligations that if we sign up to this paper today, can I get an answer from you? Does that open us up to sometime in the future, a particular marae or a particular subgroup of Māori anywhere saying, you agreed to a paper on the 12th of June 2025 that there would be equity of outcomes, and that has not happened, and we are now suing the council for failing to do that?
Thanks for the question. The first part of that, if you would like, Councillor, I'd be happy to take you out to see some of the work that we've been doing. So that's an open invitation, in fact, to any of our councillors. If you'd like to come out and see where our investment has been made in Māori outcomes, I'd certainly be welcome you to come out and have a look. Yep. The second part of that, of course, what we're suggesting with that is specifically a principle base to how we will be looking at our response to marae, our investment into maraes. It's not something that we're saying is set in stone. It's simply suggesting that we have some marae where we've where we've invested $1.2 million, and that's been able to look at things like the carvings or, you know, making sure that their wharekai is really operable. And then we have some that we've had to invest into maraes in rural settings where, because they're not connected to the mains and things like that, that we've had to invest into things like water or into the ablutions. So it's not necessarily saying that we are holding to that as a fixed position, but recognising that in our criteria and how we make these assessments, that we're considering those elements as well.
Look, I'm absolutely fine with that as the principle and what you're trying to achieve and where you're trying to take things. I guess I'll ask it really specifically. If we sign up to this paper and approve it today, is there any ability in the future for someone to use the decisions we take today to be the foundation of legal action against the council for having failed to achieve those outcomes?
So, first, I'm not in a position to give legal advice to the planning committee, and that is, if that is something that you seek, then I'll talk to the chair as well as Megan as to how we might be able to achieve that. The second thing is that we have, as part of our review, we have put this to our legal team that have looked at it. And of course, this isn't the criteria, it's really the direction setting element of this. So when we come back with our criteria investment and we're specific about how we will be dealing with that putia, then we will have we can probably give you a more robust answer at that time.
So the rubber will hit the road more when you get to the specifics rather than the general direction of travel at point.
That's correct.
All right.
Yeah, I think it's actually a good question. I guess maybe if I could add to that, I guess, are you, Nick, are you more saying, because we've already approved these budgets through LTP and this is more of a review rather than a new policy, is it more around the individual agreements with, you know, if we approve a allotment of, say, 33 applications, it'd be those, if we don't comply with...
That's exactly right.
And settlement-related activity, I imagine, but largely the policy is political, not legal. Would that be accurate? Okay. Councillor Walker.
Well, I've got a couple of questions, Mr. Chair, and essentially they follow on from Councillor Williamson. And I guess the larger context is it correct to say that council policies, strategies and plans inform the organisation at large, including the CCOs? And this would be such a strategy or measurement framework or the like. I'm assuming this is a form of strategy?
It's a strategic, so yes, just through the chair, it is a strategic document. It's already existing. It's already part of our policy framework. What we have done is refreshed it, made it a little, simplified it, and made it so that it is speaking to the priorities of iwi and our Māori communities.
Yes, I understand that. If I look at point 18, which is prioritising Māori and community needs, does it follow that it prioritise Māori ahead of any other? Because priority, I'm assuming, means first.
So with regards to the funding, this is a Māori outcomes funding framework. It stands alone alongside a number of other community-led investments that this council makes. So in that regard, it does not prioritise one over any other, but it is specific about the delivery of Māori outcomes. I think what the paper is referring to is how we deal inside that vacuum of Māori outcomes, how we deal specifically with iwi and our Māori communities.
So to be clear then, it's not talking about council at large, CCOs, in respect of prioritising Māori. It's only prioritising something within this area that you're describing.
That's how I would describe
Okay.
it, yes.
It might be useful to have some clarification because it's not obvious to me that that is the case. The other question I've got is in situations where marae, for example, played a part for the wider community, and that's been the case in recent storm events and the like. Is there any acknowledgement of that role here? Because marae aren't just for Māori, they're for the community at large, I'm assuming.
Yeah, so we acknowledge them quite regularly. I do actually think we've specifically brought that back to a number of committees around some of the work that Marae do for the community. You know, it's an interesting perspective that we have marae at all. These are cultural hubs. These are spiritual spaces, and they do play a role in our community, and they do often help other communities. But let's be clear, our mana whenua marae have often been there for, you know, a long period of time. In some instances before the formation of Tāmaki Makaurau Auckland City, so they do play a role in terms of servicing their people. But ultimately, I think you'll find that most maraes are very welcoming and allow for a broader range of things that support our wider communities.
To be clear, this strategy is for both mana whenua and mata waka marae, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Turner.
Thanks. I would be interested in taking up your offer to go and have a look at what's been delivered, but it just prompted a question. When a marae is, when part of the development is set up under you know, a resilience centre, an evacuation centre, a storm recovery centre, who pays? Is the budget for, you know, I'm thinking of one particular site I know of north of Helensville, where there was all sorts of generators and all sorts of infrastructure put in to make it a community, you know, resilience centre. Does that come out of your budget too, or is there another budget feeds in for that stuff?
Kia ora, Councillor. So just at a sort of high level, and I don't have all of the detail, but through the Marae Infrastructure Programme, we're essentially making sure that we're trying to sort of bring the building up to a standard, up to a standard where they can accommodate safely during any event or even just in normal operation. We do have an instance for Aotea Great Barrier where we've funded a generator out of the Māori Outcomes Fund to, you know, in the event of again, for normal operation, but also to support that emergency management response. But yeah, in terms of other infrastructure, we haven't, as far as I'm aware, put any specific infrastructure in for emergency management. But we'd need to talk to our emergency management team to sort of be able to clarify, you know, any assets that have gone in there.
As my understanding, Councillor Turner, not that you asked me, but yeah, long-term infrastructure that could be funded through the funds would be for the marae, but for things like emergency, COVID, the storms, things like that, it was sort of resources went where they were needed, whether it was in a library, a leisure centre, a community centre, marae, the building didn't matter, or church, so it was more where the resource was needed, and of course those agencies, including Marae, would be using their own resource and donations and things as well. But largely, as far as I remember, it was, we need a generator here, we need toilet paper here, we need towels and sheets here. It wasn't labelled on whether it was Marae or community centre or church.
Yep. Thank you. I was talking about significant infrastructure, but when we ever drive around, we have to ask questions then. Thank you.
Cool, thank you. Member Hennaday, and then I've got Councillor Bartley, and we might try and close up questions after Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Chair. The question relates to the question before Councillor Turner. Do you have any examples whereby marae, Māori in general, reo Māori programs jumped in front of somebody else or at their expense?
Nothing comes to mind, Member Toe.
So where do you think the question stems from? Because I would ask that sort of question if I had an example of somebody being nudged aside so that project A could get in front.
That may be a little hard for Nick to answer, but yeah, but I think, yeah, no. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Chair. I want to ask, one of your outcomes of measurements was storytelling up there. And as a Samoan, that's the basis of society, is whaangongo, that's what we call it, the storytelling. And I'm really interested in how you bring storytelling into a construct that, say, the finance team could understand, so you don't lose the richness of the storytelling and how we measure the outcomes. I think it's fascinating to bring it into the council. So, and is it the first time that it's been done for any council in Aotearoa?
Through the chair, Unfortunately, I am unable to respond to the question around whether or not we're the first council to ever engage in storytelling as part of our reporting on impact outcomes for Māori. However, we see the having the Māori voice as one of the ways that we're able to look at the impact for Māori. One of the things that Nick as tūmoaki and Phil as Chief Executive have been doing is we now have a Māori outcome lead for the group finance team. Just to go back to your question with regards to, a challenge of the finance team kind of describing a storytelling.
Yeah. Not to put down on the financing, but in terms of, the finances.
Yes.
Because everything in this place is about finances.
Yes, and one of the things that that Māori Outcome Lead has been looking at is it's not. I'm just trying to think of the appropriate words. It's not around teaching Māori to be numerate or literacy. It's around ensuring that they understand and communicate and can talk about financial aspects of the budget, for example. Which we had included when we had the Māori outcomes input into the annual plan, for example, a couple of weeks ago. So there are ways that you can bring in elements of finance or other enabling support like recruitment or people and culture aspects. So we think that with Tamaki Order, with the Achieving Māori Outcomes plans, each of the departments within Auckland Council will be able to articulate what it is that they can do, are doing, from that is increasing the impact for Māori.
Through the chair, just to add to that a little bit. So last year, if you recall, we did bring to Haukura and the governing body a document outlining the evaluation processes that we've been through. And storytelling, I guess, another way of talking about that is a qualitative way of measuring things. So going out, talking to people, doing interviews, bringing that information, and then getting that information out there. We've also, there's been a number of videos where we've been able to put onto social media some of the great outcomes that our community are doing in the marae space and in the community space as well. I guess what we're trying to do with this measurement framework is not just rely on the numerical data, but actually have some really compelling stories that are really showing the differences that we make, and then bring that information back to you. Because I think if you see the numbers, if we look at the input, we're looking at the output, and then you can see what that actually means for some of the people in our communities, that will give a lot more certainty to this council that the investment is the right investment.
Thank you. Well, thank all the three of you for presenting, but the teams also who work alongside you on this mahi. So we really appreciate it, and really clear answers to what is quite a big part of what we do for the city, for the council. So thank you. And we'll just get you to step back, and I'll move, and I think Councillor Filipina wanted a second. And we're moving in second.
Kia ora, thank you. Yeah, ka pai. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor. We'll move and second both item 8 and item 9. Would anyone like to speak to this? Right, cool. I will not tempt fate, and we'll just go straight to the vote then. I think this is two fantastic pieces of work in a part of what we do, in integrating it better throughout the whole Auckland Council whānau. And I think there's a lot of exciting stuff here, and as Deputy Mayor and others would like to go on the tour to see some of the work. Some of us have seen the great work that's done through these proposals, but I think this helps us understand and appreciate the outcomes more. All those in favour?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Perfect, we'll have that carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Right, we'll move to item 10. Deputy Mayor would like